Look at what you owe right now. Not the mortgage, set that aside for a moment. Look at the rest of it. The car payment, the credit card balance you have been carrying for longer than you planned to, the personal loan you took out for something you could not quite afford at the time, the buy now, pay later that seemed harmless in the moment, the subscription services that add up to more than you realize until you actually sit down and count them. Add all of it up in your head right now and sit with that number for a moment. Now think about how long you have had some of those debts, not weeks, years for most people. Some of them have been rolling forward, paying the minimum, accruing interest for so long that the original purchase is long gone and the debt is still there, growing quietly in the background of your life, the way mold grows in a wall you cannot see. And the strange thing, the thing that should bother you more than it does, is that most of the people around you are in exactly the same position. And so it has come to feel normal. It has come to feel like just how life works. It is not how life works. It is how the modern financial system works. And there is a difference. My name is Elias Carter. I was raised in the hill country of Western North Carolina, where my family has farmed the same ridge for 6 generations. Not one person in my family's history on this ridge died in debt. Not one. Not my grandfather, not his father, not his father's father, going back to when the first Carters broke ground on this land and built the farmhouse that I live in today. They were not wealthy people. There were years when the harvest was poor and the winter was long and the money was very tight, but they did not owe anyone. They did not carry balances. They did not have payments. And the freedom that came from that, the particular kind of freedom that comes from not owing anyone anything, shaped everything about how they lived and what they were able to do and who they were able to be. Today, I'm going to tell you how they did it, the rule they lived by, where it came from, how they applied it in every financial decision they ever made, and why it is more relevant and more urgent right now than it has ever been. And I'm going to tell you the part that should make you think hard, which is that the financial system most people live inside today was not designed to help you build the kind of financial life my grandfather had. It was designed to make money from you not having it. Stay with me. Before I tell you the rule, I want to tell you something about the way the old mountain families thought about money, because it is different from how most people think about it today in a way that matters enormously. They did not think of money primarily as a medium of exchange, something you earn and spend and earn again in an endless cycle. They thought of money as stored work. Every dollar they had represented a portion of real human effort, hours of their lives, the labor of their hands and their backs and their minds, converted into a form that could be stored and used later. When you understand money that way, spending it carelessly is not just a financial mistake, it is wasting a piece of your life. And borrowing money, which means spending stored work you have not yet done and committing to do extra work in the future just to cover the cost of borrowing, that is something you do only in the most serious and considered circumstances, if you do it at all. My grandfather used to say that a man who borrows money for something he wants today is working tomorrow for yesterday's pleasure. I have never heard a cleaner description of what consumer debt actually is. You are trading future labor, future time, future freedom for something you could not afford to pay for with the work you have already done, and the lender takes a cut of that future labor for the privilege of letting you have the thing now. That is the whole transaction. The old mountain families saw it clearly because they thought about money in terms of work and time rather than in terms of payment amounts and monthly budgets. And when you see it that way, the transaction looks very different. A car payment of $400 a month does not feel like much until you calculate how many hours of your working life that represents every single month for 5 years. Then it feels like exactly what it is. And the old mountain families would have told you that before you signed anything, because they calculated in hours and days of work, not in dollar amounts that the lender made small enough to feel manageable. Now let me tell you the rule. The old Holler financial rule, which my grandfather lived by and taught to his children, and which I'm going to describe in its simplest form, was this. You do not buy what you cannot pay for today, not what you almost have the money for, not what you will have the money for next month. What you can pay for today in full from what you have already earned, everything else you save for until you can. That is it. It is not complicated. It does not require a spreadsheet or a financial advisor or an app on your phone. It requires only the discipline to wait and the understanding that waiting is not deprivation. It is protection. Every purchase you make without debt is a purchase that costs you only what the thing costs. Every purchase you make with debt costs you the thing plus the interest plus the time and freedom you spend earning the money to pay that interest. The old mountain families understood this as a simple and non-negotiable arithmetic, and they lived inside it without exception. The rule had two parts in practice. The first part was about how they spent. The second part was about how they saved. Both parts were necessary, and neither one worked without the other. On the spending side, the Mountain families had a practice that most people today have never experienced. Before they bought anything that was not a regular consumable, not food, not the necessities of daily life, they waited. They did not wait a day or a week. They waited until they had the full price in hand and had sat with the idea of the purchase long enough to be certain they still wanted it. My grandfather had a rule he called the month rule. If he was considering any purchase above a certain amount, he would write it down on a piece of paper and put it in a drawer and leave it there for 30 days. If at the end of 30 days he still wanted it and had the money for it, he bought it. If he had changed his mind or the money was needed elsewhere, he did not. He said that most of what people spend money on, they do not want in 30 days. He was right about that. The impulse purchase, the thing that felt urgent and necessary in the moment, looks very different after a month. The marketing has faded. The emotional response has cooled. You can see the thing clearly for what it is, and more often than not, what it is does not justify the price. I want to sit with the month rule for a moment because it is more powerful than it sounds, and I want you to understand why. Modern retail, online shopping in particular, is engineered to collapse the distance between wanting something and having it. One-click ordering, same-day delivery, buy now, pay later with zero interest for 6 months, all of it is designed to eliminate the gap between desire and purchase, because that gap is where most purchases go to die. If you have to wait, if you have to think about it, if you have to come back tomorrow or next week, most purchases simply do not happen. The retail industry knows this and has spent decades designing systems to remove the wait entirely. My grandfather's month rule is the direct counter to that system. It reinserts the wait deliberately, and it does exactly what the retailers fear. It lets most impulse purchases die quietly in the drawer while the money stays in your pocket. It is one of the most powerful financial tools I know, and it costs nothing to use. On the saving side, the Mountain families treated saving not as what was left over after spending, but as the first thing that happened with any money that came in. Before the bills, before the groceries, before anything else, a portion of every dollar that came onto the farm went into reserve. Not into a bank necessarily, though later generations used banks, into a physical reserve, a cash reserve, something they could see and count and access without anyone else's permission or approval. The old Mountain people were deeply suspicious of financial institutions, and not without reason. They had lived through bank failures and economic collapses that had destroyed the savings of people who trusted their money to someone else. They kept what they needed close and in a form they controlled. That suspicion is unfashionable today, but it is not unreasonable. The people who lost their savings in the bank failures of the early 20th century were not foolish people. They were people who trusted a system that was not designed with their interests as its primary concern. The size of the reserve they kept was not calculated as a percentage of income the way modern financial advice frames it. It was calculated as a cushion against the specific risks of their specific life. A farming family in the mountains needed enough in reserve to get through a bad harvest year without borrowing. They needed enough to replace a critical piece of equipment if it broke. They needed enough to cover a medical emergency without going to someone with their hat in their hand. They knew their risks because they knew their life, and they built the reserve to match those risks rather than following a formula someone else designed for a different kind of life. My grandfather kept his reserve in a tin box in the back of a kitchen cabinet. He knew to the dollar what was in it at any given time. He added to it every time money came in, and he touched it only for the specific categories of need he had defined for it. He did not call it an emergency fund or a savings account. He called it the cushion, and the cushion was not optional. It was the foundation of everything else. A family with a cushion has options. A family without one does not, and the first unexpected expense turns them toward debt the way a river turns toward the lowest ground. Now let me tell you what the rule was not, because this is where most people misunderstand the old Mountain approach to money and where I want to be clear. The old Holler financial rule was not about scarcity or deprivation or never enjoying anything. The Mountain families I am describing were not joyless people grinding through lives of calculated austerity. They ate well from what they grew. They celebrated and feasted on the high occasions. They gave generously to their neighbors and their community. They repaired and maintained what they owned so that it lasted and served them well for years. What they did not do was spend money on things that did not matter to them in order to feel temporarily better or to signal something to the people around them. They were indifferent to that kind of spending in a way that modern consumer culture finds almost incomprehensible, because modern consumer culture is built on exactly that kind of spending. The social pressure to buy, to upgrade, to have the new version of the thing. to keep up with the standard of living that advertising tells you is normal, that pressure was not absent from mountain communities. Human beings have always competed socially, but the mountain families had a counter pressure that was stronger, the deeply held belief that owing money to anyone was a form of weakness and dependence that no amount of nice things was worth. Debt was not just a financial condition, it was a character condition. A man in debt was a man who had spent tomorrow's freedom for today's comfort, and that was considered a poor trade by people who understood exactly how much their freedom was worth. Let me tell you what happened to the people on this ridge who did not follow the rule, because that story is as instructive as the one about those who did. There were families up in these hollows who borrowed, not maliciously, not stupidly. They borrowed because the pressure to have more and do more than they could currently afford was real, and because the lenders made it easy, and because everyone around them seemed to be doing it and getting away with it. What they got away with in the short term was the thing they bought. What they paid for it in the long term was the freedom to make their own decisions. A man who owes money to a bank or a creditor is a man who cannot afford to have a bad year. A man who cannot afford to have a bad year is a man who cannot say no to a bad deal. He cannot hold out for the right price for his timber. He cannot plant the crop he believes in over the crop that is currently selling. He cannot take the time off to care for a sick family member without someone else's permission. The debt does not just cost money, it costs options. And options, the ability to say yes to what is right and no to what is wrong on your own judgment, that is what the old mountain families understood as the real substance of a free life. My grandfather watched neighbors lose land they had farmed for generations, not because they were lazy or dishonest, but because they had borrowed against that land and the harvest failed and the payment came due and they had no cushion and no options. He watched it happen more than once. It made a deep impression on him and he never forgot it and he never let it happen to him. He said, "Land that is owed on is not your land. It is the bank's land and you are farming it for them until either you pay them off or they decide they want it back." That statement is as true today as it was when he said it, and most people with a mortgage have never once thought about their home that way. I am not saying do not buy a home. I am saying know what it means to carry the debt and build your cushion strong enough that a hard year does not cost you the house. I want to say one more thing about the relationship between debt and dignity, because the old mountain people understood something about this that the modern world has largely forgotten. They believed, and I believe they were right, that financial independence and personal dignity are inseparable. A man who owes money is a man who must answer to whoever he owes it to. He cannot speak his mind freely to his banker. He cannot make decisions about his land or his time or his family without considering the creditor's interest. He is not fully his own man in the way that a man with no debts and a full cushion is his own man. The old mountain people had a fierce pride about this that modern culture tends to dismiss as stubborn or old-fashioned, but that pride was not vanity. It was the practical expression of understanding that your ability to live according to your own values and make your own decisions is directly connected to whether anyone else has a financial claim on your future. Debt is a claim on your future. Every payment you owe is a decision you cannot make freely. The old mountain families refused those claims, not because they did not want nice things, but because they valued their freedom more than anything that debt could buy them. Now, I want to take a moment here because this is the part that matters most, and it goes well beyond a family budget or a savings account. The financial system that most people live inside today is not designed to help you build financial freedom. It is designed to monetize the gap between what you earn and what you want. The credit card companies make money when you carry a balance. The auto loan industry makes money when you finance a car you cannot pay for in cash. The buy now, pay later services make money when you split a purchase into installments. The subscription economy makes money from the cumulative weight of small recurring charges that are individually too small to notice and collectively significant. None of those industries profit from you saving patiently and buying only what you can afford. Every one of them profits from you doing the opposite. The average American household carries over $9,000 in credit card debt. The average new car loan is over $35,000 at an average interest rate. That means a buyer pays several $1,000s more than the car costs over the life of the loan. The average American pays over $1,000 per year in credit card interest alone. That is money earned by real human work being handed to financial institutions for the privilege of spending money you did not yet have. My grandfather would have looked at those numbers and understood them as a picture of a population that had been separated from the knowledge that allowed his generation to live free of that system, not through their own failure. Through the systematic removal of the cultural knowledge and community norms that made the old way of living possible. The marketing that drives the spending is equally deliberate. The feeling that you deserve this, that you have earned it, that you owe it to yourself, that everyone else has one, that this price will never come again. Those are not accidental feelings. They are engineered. They are the product of decades of research into how to move a human being from contentment to desire to purchase in the shortest possible time. The mountain families were not immune to desire. Nobody is. But they had a rule that was stronger than desire, and they had a community that reinforced that rule rather than undermining it. When your neighbors think debt is weakness and saving is strength, you are surrounded by a cultural force that runs opposite to the one most people today are swimming in. That cultural force was one of the most important financial assets the mountain families had, and it cost nothing. So here's what I want you to do this week. Not a budget, not a spreadsheet. Those things have their place, but they are not the place to start. The place to start is the rule. Write it down somewhere you will see it. You do not buy what you cannot pay for today. Then look at one thing you are currently paying for with debt and ask yourself plainly what it actually cost you, not the sticker price, the total cost including interest and the time you are working to pay that interest. See the number clearly. Then ask yourself whether you would have bought it at that price if someone had told you the real price up front. That question alone changes the way most people look at the next purchase before it becomes a debt. Then start the cushion, not the full cushion. 1 month of it, whatever 1 month of your most basic expenses amounts to. Put that number in a form you can see and count and access without anyone else's permission, and do not touch it for anything that does not qualify as a genuine emergency. Build from there. 1 month becomes 3 months, becomes a year, and somewhere along that road you will feel for the first time what the old mountain families felt every day of their lives. The particular quiet freedom of not owing anyone anything. Tell me in the comments whether your family had any financial rules that were passed down, anything that was just understood about how you handled money, any saying or practice that came from the generation before you. I read every single one of these, and the wisdom you all carry from your own families is some of the most valuable content that comes out of this channel. For folks who want all of it, every idea and method I have covered on this channel, and the ones I have not gotten to yet, I have put it together in a book. You will find the link down in the description below. Next time, I am going to show you how the old mountain families built a root cellar that held a steady 55 degrees year-round in January and August both, with no electricity, no machinery, nothing but clay, stone, and the way my great-grandfather read a hillside. It keeps food without a refrigerator, and it has been keeping food on this ridge for over 100 years. It is the natural next step from today. Until then, write down the rule, say no to one thing you cannot afford today, and remember that the people who built these mountains with their hands knew that a man who owes nothing to anyone is a man who can look any other man in the eye.